Okay, we're learning for Refuah Shalema, for Sarah Baschaya, Tzvi Ben Leah Miriam. It's a cousin of mine who was electrocuted climbing a fence in Israel. And Rabbi Yisuka, Foil Avraham Nisanel Ben Masha Tzvi Masha Liba, who's not doing well. So it's a lot of learning today. Okay. Says the Mishnah on Tzadik Gimel Amid Aleph. Says the Mishnah on Tzadik Gimel Amid Aleph. So you're buying Paris, you're buying it a certain amount, and in the Paris is going to be a certain amount of inedibles, right? A certain amount of inedibles. Harizem Mekabel Olav, the Leikeach accepts Roiva Tinoifes Lissa Te'enim. Lissa, excuse me. Lissa. So a quarter of Tnufais for a sa. Now there's 6 kavim in a sa. So we're going to have a quarter of that. 1 times 6 is 1/24. So 1/24 of garbage you have to accept. Now we're going to see what the garbage is. Is it mamish garbage or not? Te'enim mekabel of esa mitulois lemeya. For 100, I don't know what exactly the measurements of the te'enim are. Esa te'enim. If you buy 10 te'enim, for your mekabel 10, you buy 100 te'enim. 10 of them you could expect to have worms in them. 10 of them you could expect to have worms in them. Martiv shel yayin, if you buy a martiv yayin, the kabel of esa kusasais. You're going to have 100 barrels, you're going to have 10 barrels that are not good. Lemeya. Lemeya kankanim. Basharoin, in that area called Sharon, the kabel of esa pizzais. You're going to go ahead and buy, you're going to buy barrels. So 10 of those barrels, I guess 100 barrels, 10 of them are not going to be good. In other words, this is a certain amount of that the Lokeach anticipates that's not going to be good. He accepts it, and the deal is the deal. It says now, when it said 1/24 of payros, you accept that. What are you accepting? It says Tana Rav Katina, Roiva Kitnios. You're accepting Roiva Kitnios Lissa. For 1 saw, you're accepting 1/24 of kitnios. However, afaferes loy, mashma, but shmutz not. Afaferes is dirt. So mashma, you have to accept legumes. In other words, beans or whatnot. That is not what you wanted, but you accept it. But mashma shmutz, you don't have to accept. I've Omer Rabba Avchia Katuspa'a. That's the name of a place. Mishmei de Rabba. Boyret swar. If a person goes ahead and he is taking out pebbles, migroine shel chaveroi, from the groin of his friend, noisin law demei chitin. He has to pay him demei chitin. In other words, this person who bought it was going to accept X amount of volume, and that X amount of volume was made up partially of pebbles. By you going ahead and cleaning out the pebbles, you're decreasing the volume. Thus, you're causing him money. And Rashbam goes out and says, what about Grama? He says, this is Garmi. He said, this would be considered Garmi. Okay? If you look at the Rashbam, we spoke about Garmi being a miyad, right, or direct. So Rashbam has another pshat. Go down to Rashbam. Where the Gemara is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 lines down, or 10 lines down. The Grama bin Izaken, a parallel to 10 lines down. The Grama bin Izaken, the Kaimel and the Pata, Hainu Kigain, Shalech as a be'ero biyad chereshoit of a cotton. You took a be'er, you took a torch, and you put it in the hands of a chereshoit of a cotton. Shehahezek nigud. It's recognizable that there's going to be a hezek. It's recognizable that there's going to be a hezek. Aval goyrim achshav sheyavay hezek memelo lachas man. But that it's going to you're causing it to take place after a certain period of time. Aval dini degarmi. What's the difference of dini degarmi? Biyodayim hu mazik. He's doing it immediately. Biyodayim. It's more direct. Elashein ha'hezek nikar. It's not so recognizable. So the classic case of garmi, you go ahead, you take a shtar, or someone owes you money, you sell it to somebody, and then you burn the shtar, right? So you're causing him a loss. Miyad. You Yadayim, you burnt the star, and now you're causing that what? He can't collect the money, right? That you caused the person a loss, even without selling it. You just caused them a loss. You gave it to him as a matana, you caused them a loss. That is the classic case of Garmi. Says the Rashbam, this would be Garmi. By going ahead and taking pebbles out of the volume, decreasing the volume of the silo would be Garmi, be a dayim, and therefore you have to pay. Good. Continues the Gemara. Kitnius, right? Roiva. Okay, so that's the kasha. Nice of the mechitin. So you have a kasha. You're telling me that what? You're telling me that the person accepts legumes, he accepts kitnius, but shmutz, he doesn't have to accept. You see over here that shmutz is worth money. You see that what? That pebbles, which is shmutz, is worth money, because if you decrease it, then the guy, you're causing the guy a loss. Kasha on the din of what? Of Rav Katina. Kasha on the din of Rav Katina, says the Gemara, and for the Gemara, kitnius, right? Betfua is roiva hakat. Kitnius, if you're going ahead and you use kitnius mixed with tefua, the share is a quarter to a kav to a sa. Afayferes hochas meroiva hakat. Afayferes betfua, person's makabel less than a roiva of a kav. In other words, you do when we said a 1/4, it wasn't to say that like shmutz you have to accept. No, shmutz you don't have to accept, right? No, we weren't saying shmutz you don't have to accept, right? Because you see over here that you do accept a certain amount of shmutz. If the guy didn't take it out, if he wasn't decreasing the volume, it would remain there. So when it says the difference is in the amount that he has to accept. If it's the ratio of a 1/24 to a sa of legumes mixed with schitim, he has to accept that. He has to accept that, right? If it's less than that, he has to accept, but not more than that. In other words, he doesn't have to accept less than that, right? Pachos me roiva, right? So here's the way you read it. Noishmud mechitin kasha. You see that what that the tzrori has to accept, and for the Gemara, kitnius roiva. Kitnius, what's the amount that he has to accept? Is a roiva. Afaferis is pachas me roiva, right? Afaferis what is less than roiva, but not more than that. It doesn't have to accept. By the way, guys, this is the source for Pesach, why we don't need kitnius, because you're speaking about chitin. You're speaking about chitin, and mixed with the chitin is what? Is legumes. So you're worried about if you're going to go ahead and eat legumes, eat kitnius on Pesach, it may have some chitim attached to it that can become chametz. This is the source. This Gemara is the source for kitnius. That's the chumrah of kitnius. Comes from here. That you see that you're allowed to have mixed in with chitin kitnius, right? So the shayla is, what about the kitnius that they didn't have? The place can speak about peanuts. They didn't have peanuts. So we don't eat peanuts on Pesach. But why not? The whole svara, it doesn't apply to them. This is shayla in the Pesach. Okay, anyway. Says the Gemara Vaita. Vayferes roiva loi. You told me that you don't have to accept a quarter of shmutz. But Tanya, hamoicha peiros lechaveiroi, right? A person sells peiros to his friend. Now, it depends what he's selling. For example, chitin, if he sells chitin wheat, makabel of roiva, he has to makabel what? Roiva kitnius the sa. He has to accept a quarter of kitnius for a sa of wheat, 1/24. Sa'irin, if you buy a sa of sa'irin, of barley, makabel of roiva, nishayvis the sa. You're going to go ahead and accept a quarter of a 1/24 of a sa of kava of straw. Adoshim, lentils, makabel of roiva, afaferis the sa. By adoshim, you're going to be makabel a roiva, a 1/24 of shmutz to a sa. So what do you see? You just told me that afaferis is less than a quarter. Here you see that what? When it comes to adoshim, right? When it comes to adoshim, it's a quarter. Now, the Gemara's Havamina fellas is when it speaks about chitim and kitnius, and it speaks about so'irim and nishayves, and it's speaking about adoshim and afaferes, it's hu adin all the others. They're just speaking about what was commonly found among that specific species. So by chitin, you're going to find kidneys, and by soirin, you're going to find the sheves, and adoshim, you're going to find afoferes. So the Gemara's kasha is, you see over here that chitim, you would have to accept a quarter of what? Of shmutz. And you just told me less, you don't even have to say less than a quarter, right? That's the kasha. My love, hu adin lechitim l'soirim, that you have to accept a quarter of shmutz. Says the Gemara, no. Shiny adoshim, the ma'aka akri lahu. The way they go ahead and harvest is different by chitim and by adoshim. Adoshim, you have to seem to take out with your hands. And when you uproot it, the shmutz comes along with it. Chitim, the way it's cut, you don't have shmutz with it. So it's not like you thought. It's not like you thought that each one of these undesirables you have to accept. Each one is specific to its min. So kitnius is specific to chitim, and sheves straw is particular to soirim, and oiferes is particular what to adoshim. But einachinami, if you're going ahead and buying a sa of flour, of wheat flour, you do not have to accept a quarter of the shmutz. That you don't have to do. You don't have to accept that. I don't know why I said flour. It should be lav dafka flour. It could be chitim. Okay, says the Gemara. Elataima that shiny adoshim demaka akrilahu. Elataima da adoshim demaka akrilahu. The reason why you have to accept a quarter of shmutz by adoshim, because the way you uproot it, that's a normal amount. Avachiti isari loy, but chitim and sa'ari, you do not have to accept shmutz a quarter. So tifshit minei chitu sa'ari devaferes loy mekabel, right? Let's go ahead and say you don't have to mekabel. In other words, when you see after mekabel it by adoshim, mashma, you don't have to mekabel it at all by what? By chitim. Yet you said chitim that you have to accept less than a quarter. You'd have to accept, right? Remember, you're removing pebbles. Pebbles is shmutz, it's like ferris, and you're removing pebbles. It takes up volume, so if it takes up volume, obviously it's allowed to be there. Let's make a diak. It's only allowed to be there by adoshim. It can't be there by chitim at all. Says the Mekabel ferris. You do have to mekabel. In other words, don't make the diak. Guys, what's the diak you're making? Here's the diak. You're making the diak. Adoshim, you have to accept. Mashma, chitim, you don't have to accept it at all. But 1 second, you told me you could accept less than a quarter. So the Gemara says no. The chiddush is by what? Is by adoshim. The adoshim is trichilei. Meaning, really by chitim and soirim, you have to accept. You have to accept that. You don't have to accept a quarter, but less than a quarter you do. So what's the diak then? The diak is the following. The salkadai dechaminon. Kivin de ma'aka akralahu, since you're uprooting the adoshim, and along with that, you're schlepping a lot of shmutz. Yoisa miravoy nami lekabel. I might think you have to accept even more than a quarter, not limited to a quarter. So the chiddush is for itself. Don't make the diak. Adoshim you have to accept, but chita you don't have to accept shmutz. No, that's not the diak. The diak is adoshim. You only have to accept up to a quarter, but more than that, you don't have to accept. Because you have a havamina, since that's part of the process of harvesting adoshim, it's so commonly uprooted, I might think you have to accept even more. Kemash malon, that no, you don't have to accept more than a quarter. By what? By adoshim. However, by soirim chitim, you have to accept less than a quarter. So, yoitzim idvarenu, by chitim, if you're going to go ahead and buy a saw of chitin, so you have to accept 1/4 of a kav of what of legumes of kidneys, and less than that of ferris. But less than a quarter, you'd have to accept. You have to accept less than a quarter. Good. That's yotzim midvareinu. Okay. Second part of the daf. Rav Huna says Rav Huna in Baal Linaples. Now this guy has more than a quarter. He has more than a quarter. Now, there's two possibilities, guys. A quarter you have to accept, correct? Yeah? Again, a quarter, that's standard. 1/24 you have to accept. Let's say this guy goes over the top, and there's more schmutz in there. So there's two possibilities. He has to get it down to 1/24, or once he begins to sift, the whole thing he has to get rid of. He'd have to get rid of all of the kidneys. Those are two possibilities, right? In other words, if it was 1/24 of kidneys, that you could have. This guy has more than that. And now you're removing it. To what extent do you have to remove it? Do you remove it to the 1/24th line? Or once you're working, you get rid of the whole thing? Rav Huna is going to say you get rid of the whole thing. And that's going to lead to a discussion. Rav Huna, in Bolden Napos, he went overboard, and now you're going ahead and you're cleaning up. Good. Menape es kula. You go ahead and you sift through all of that. You sift through all of that. Let's see Rashbam's second very wide line. Rav Huna Amar. Rav Huna imbol lekeach lahakbid b'tinoifis. The near be'enav, he sees sheyesh by tenufas yoisim merova, that there's more than 1/24 mixed in there. Ubol lekeach lenapaisai, and the lekeach's coming to go ahead and sift ladas to know if there's more than a quarter. Lo and behold, guess what? There is. So menapes kulon, chitin kinegdon. He has to go ahead and replace it with chitin. Oimois. You already were Michael. So you hear this, guys. If there was 1/24, the volume of whatever that is, that's taking up the volume of kidneys that is supplanting the wheat, would be accepted. Conversely, if it's over the mark and you begin to go ahead and check it out, then says Rav Huna, you get rid of everything. And guess what? Now the moicher is going to have to go ahead and supplant the volume, the more than 1/24 of kidneys. He's going to have to provide either chitim or money. And he can't tie in 1 second. You will moichel up to that amount. Says Rav Huna, nope. And now we have two reasons. Guys, you have it? You have Rav Huna's din? One more time. Okay. If you buy a saw of kidneys, of wheat, you accept in that saw of wheat 1/24 of kidneys. You find in there the guy has he has 1/20 kidneys, right? In other words, he's over the top. He's over the top he's over a third. He's over. Now, there's two ways to look at it now. What is done now? You could say, well, take the 120, build it up to 120, fill it up with chitim till 1/24, and then you'll leave it on its din, which is what? I'm moichel the 1/24. Or no, do we say this, since this guy cheated in the first place by going ahead and having more than he's supposed to have, then he loses everything. And therefore, he's going to have to replace all that 1/20th that was there, right? And he builds it, that 1/24th, he's going to have to go ahead and replace it with real good wheat or pay the lekeach for that. That's what Rav Huna says. Rav Huna, in Bolin Apos, if the lekeach comes to go ahead and sift, because he feels that there's too much kidneys there, and he finds that taka there is too much kidneys there, menapes kula, he sifts through the whole thing and says the Rashbam, and now Rav Huna says he's got to make everything up with good wheat. The kidneys does not count for anything since you cheated the system. Imri law. Some say dina, that's the din. The Imri law kinasa. And some people say we cancel this guy. It's a fine. Right. Some say it's the din like that, and some say it's a fine. Imri law dina. What's the tzad that the din is that way? Mandiyov zuze apiri shapiriyov. When you bought wheat, you gave money for wheat. You didn't give money for kidneys. You gave money for 100% semolinas. Does that make sense? Something like that. I don't know. 100% the wheat. For roiva like tarach inish. For roiva, a quarter of kidneys, the guy's not, it's a minuscule amount that he's not going to bother sifting it out. So he's Michael. Yoiseme roiva, but more than that, tarach inish. Once it's more than 1/24th, 1/20th, he will be matriach. He doesn't want it. The kivin de tarach, Once he's troubling himself for that little part, the extra, tarach b'kula. Once you sit, in other words, to sift initially, I'm not going to. But once I start, because you're overboard, the din is just keep on going, and the guy's going to have to make it up. That's if it's a din. The imilo kanasa, others say no, it's a fine. We find this guy for not being on the up and up. Roiva shchiach, a roiva of or 1/24th to a sa of kidneys is shchiach to find. Yoisa, but more than that, loy shchiach. More than that is not shchiach. The hu the ariv, and how did it get there? He mixed it in. The kirim, the ariv, and since this guy was a unscrupulous individual, and he mixed in the legumes, he mixed in the kidneys. Kansura bana bekula. They constant him on the whole thing. So guys, two started, right? Rav Huna's din that what? Once the guy is overboard, he loses all the rights of the displacement of the kidneys. In other words, he's gonna have to pay wheat. He's gonna have to pay wheat. Now, one says it's a din, the other one says it's kanas. If it's a din, in other words, up to a certain period, the person is moichel, he doesn't want matriach, but once he's matriach, it's matriach. The other one is it's a kanas. How did it? If 1/24th is shchiach and 1/20th is not shchiach, correct? How in the world did it get to 1/20th? Ella, it must be that what? The guy went ahead and he mixed it in. Oh, this guy is what? Is not, as Kenny says, he's not for leslach, right? What are we going to do? We're going to go ahead, what, and kansa him. We're going to give him a kanas. Now that the Gemara is going to focus on that. It's either going to ask on Rav Huna, right, or it's going to bring a raya to Rav Huna, guys. You got it? We're going to ask on Rav Huna, or we're going to bring a raya to Rav Huna on this last din of kanas. Says the Gemara. Simin is kol trei shtori derovin barav nachman oino the kablanusa. We're going to see only a few of them today. Mesave. Okay, guys, you have kalayim. You can't plant kalayim, and you have a saw. You have a saw of one species, and you have X amount of another species. So there's a certain shear that it's kalayim. So kol saw sheyesh ba roiva mimin acher, any saw that has 1/24th of another species there, in order to plant it, you may it. What do? Is you detract from that other species. You take away from the other species. So it's 1/24, you make it 1/25, 1/26. You go ahead, and make it less. Good? You make it less. Guys, got it? Again, if it's 1/24th of the species that you're planting, you can't plant them together. You have to go ahead and diminish that amount. So take away, and therefore it'll go from 1/24 to 1/25, 1/26, whatever it is. Good. Now, Savrua, the Chachamim, they held to say, the Roiva de Kalayim, the share of 1/24th by Kalayim is Kiyosa me Roiva de Hacha. It's like more than 1/24th over here. In other words, just like over here, more than 1/24th, 1/20th, right? You're going to have to do something. So too, a quarter by Kalayim, you're going to have to do something. Good. The Kotani Yemayit. So guys, look at me. Look at me. What did Rav Huna say? If you have more than 1/24th, you have to get rid of the whole thing. Good. We're equating Kalayim to us, meaning just like by us more than 1/24, you have to get rid of. So too by Kalayim 1/24th, you get rid of. Good. Now, when it said get rid of, you didn't have to get rid of the whole species. All you had to do was get rid of a little bit of the species. Kasha and Rav Nachman. On Rav Huna, l'chayra, all you had to do is, when you're over the 1/24, all you had to do is take it down to get to 1/24. You didn't have to go all the way. So a lumda shakasha from Kalayim on the Shita of Rav Huna. One more time. Rav Huna is of the opinion that anything more than 1/24, you're finished. That's it. Meaning you lose all rights and you're going to have to replace it. Good? The volume doesn't count. We're equating a Mishnah in Kalayim with that din of Rav Huna, which is our din. Our din is 1/24, right? So we're saying 1/24th of Kalayim is like more than 1/24th by by Mechira. So, and by Kalayim, you don't have to get rid of everything to not be Kalayim. All you had to do was diminish it less than 124. So who adin, if you have more kitnius mixed in, you don't have to go ahead and get rid of all the kitnius. Just get to the 124th point. Kasha on Rav Huna says you have to get rid of the whole thing. Okay. Says the Gemara, let's do the Lashon again. Kolsa sheyesh ba roiva b'minacha yemayet. Serua the roiva the kalayim ki yaisim revua. Like the roiva by kalayim, the 124th balayim is like the 120th by us. The hacha v'katani yemayet, and it says just go ahead and diminish it. It says more loy roiva the kalayim ki roiva the hacha dummy. In other words, the roiva of kalayim is like roiva by us. So now you don't have a good sushtel because it's a quarter 124, 124. By kalayim you have to get rid of it, but over here you don't have to get rid of it at all. 124 by 124. By Mechira, that's acceptable. By Kalayim, it's not. Now, the question is, if you're telling me the share 124 is acceptable by us, why isn't it acceptable by Kalayim? Obviously, it's like a Dava Choshev. It's not. So says the Gemara, so Ihachi, if it's equal, Amayimayit. Why do you have to go ahead, Rod, and diminish it? Keep it just like by Mechira. The kitnius remains as part of the deal. So to buy kalayim, 124 should be part of the deal. It should not be considered kalayim. Says the Gemara mishum chumra de kalayim. Because of the chumra of kalayim, that's why you have to go ahead and diminish. But it's not a kasha on Rav Huna. Rav Huna is a kasha only when it's more than 124. When it's 124, there's no kasha on Rav Huna anymore. Because I'm not discussing where you have to go ahead and diminish. 124 by Mechira is acceptable. So why isn't it acceptable by Kalayim? Because of the Chumrah of Kalayim. But it's not a kash now in Rav Huna. Ihachi feg Gemara, if you're telling me that it's speaking 124 equals 124, Amos Seifa, let's go look at the Seifa of that Mishnah in Kalayim. Rabbi Yossi Omer, Rabbi Yossi says, right, when you have what? Yavor, you're telling me 124, Yavor, you can go ahead and get rid of the whole thing. You'd have to get rid of, let's say you had Kalayim, you had to get Kalayim, you had species X. You'd have to get rid of the whole thing, right? You'd have to get rid of the whole thing. Now, Bishlema, Kiyosa Miravua, Mitanufis Dummy. Bishlema, if you're going to tell me Kalayim 124 equals 120 by Mechira, I got a machloikis between the Tanakama and Rabbi Yossi. Tanakama who says just diminish savar loy kansinan hetera ata isura. We don't cancel heter. We don't cancel heter ata isura. We don't go ahead and make a kanas, right? Heter ata isura. Over here, 124, you don't have to get rid of. That's heter. So we're not going to cancel it ata isura by kalayim. So all you'll do what is Yimayit. Rabbi Yossi Sava Kansinon. We cancel heta of Issa. In other words, he's going to cancel that you have to get rid of everything. You have to get rid of the whole kav of Issa over there. Right? Like Rav Huna, who said before, you get rid of everything. So I have an explanation to understand the shita of Rabbi Yossi. So Bishlema, if you're going to tell me, guys, 124 equals 120. So in other words, Kalayim more than 124 is equal to 124. So this is, we cancel Isser at the heter. And therefore you get rid of the whole thing. And therefore he doesn't cancel, you don't have to get rid of the whole thing. So therefore you might over here, and Rabbi Yossi says, no, you have to get rid of the whole thing. We cancel, again, the heter is the Mechira, 124. The Isser is more than 124. Right, more than 124. Excuse me, it's the opposite. It's the opposite. I'm sorry. We're comparing 124 of Kalayim to more than 124 over here. So we're going to cancel the Issa of Kalayim after the Heta. We're going to go ahead and cancel the Isser of the Isser over here are the Kalayim, and therefore we cancel and we get rid of the whole thing. If you don't hold cancel, that you just go ahead and keep it at 120 at 124. Li amit if you can say they're equal, my yaver. Guys, why again? If it's 124 and 124, why does Rabbi Yossi hold you get rid of the whole thing? And what are you worried about? over here we consider Isser at the heter, right? But over here there was no Isser. It was 124 was permitted, 124 is permitted. So why would Rabbi Yossi require me to get rid of the whole thing? As I afraid the Gemara. If you're going to tell me that what? That it's speaking 124 in both venues, in the venue of Mechira and in the venue of Kalayim, Amay Yavar, why do you have to get rid of the whole thing? Says the reason is because over there it appears like you're keeping Kalayim. In other words, Kalayim is a severe thing, and it looks like you're keeping it. So Enochinami, else the din itself, you should not have to. 124, 124, your mayit should be enough. But Kalayim, in other words, you're not, but Kalayim, which is more severe than Michsi Kalayim, you have to get rid of the whole thing. So therefore, not a kasha on Rav Huna. Toshma. Okay, now it's amazing how Mimerchak Tavi Lachma, but it's really Bonstein as a Lashon. Mimerchak Tavi Lachma, how the Torah, the Gemara brings in, we're jumping from Kalayim to Bab Mitzia. Okay, famous Gemara in Bab Mitzia, right? The case of Mana Shlishi. This guy gives the guy 200, this guy gives 100. They're going now they go to Reuven gives 200, Shimon gives 100 to Harry. Now they come to Harry, and Reuven says, "Where's my 200?" And Shimon says, "Where's my 200?" Now he only got 300. He accepted 200 from one and 100 from the other. What's the din? The din is that you leave 100 over. And each one gets 100, and you leave 100 over. That's the din. Tashma. Shnayim shefkidu eitzel echad. Zem mana v'zem masayim. Zoim Masayim shali. This one says the Masayim is mine. Zoim Masayim shali. Zoim Masayim shali. And this one says the 200 is mine. So one guy's lying. One guy's lying for sure. Noisen lezem mana. Lezem mana. You give this one 100, and you give this one 100. And all the rest, right? All the rest you leave over to what? Till Eliyahu comes. What's the kasha? Guys, what's the kasha? Geschmack. What did Rav Huna say? When a guy's a liar, what do? You cancel him the whole thing. So over here, we got one guy's lying, so why is he getting 100? You should cancel the whole thing. That's the kasha in Rav Huna. You see over here, in other words, you get the vadai, so he should get the 124th. But why do we say no? We say we cancel this guy, right? Why do we cancel him? He loses everything. But you see over here where you have vadai a liar, one of them is certainly lying. You don't cancel the guy. That's the kasha of him.
Isn't there a mandam there who says you do? You take
hang in there. Very good, Baruch. Okay. Says the Gemara, Hachi Hashta. What's your comparison? Hasam vaday mana lamar, umana lamar. True is a liar, but they're only lying on 100. Each one vaday has 100, so therefore each one gets that, and the whole nidin is on the other 100, and therefore on that other 100 you leave it to Eliyahu. Hacha mi yemar delav kula ruve ariv. How do you know this guy didn't go ahead and mix in all 1/20th? Right? You don't know. Therefore we cancel the whole thing. In other words, over there, he's lying, but he's only lying on 100. Ken Zain over here, he's lying on the whole ganza 120 of the kitnius that he mixed in. So Memela says, Rav Huna, that's why you cancel the whole thing. That's why. It's not a good sushtel, he says. Over there, he's only lying on 100. Vadai, he has 100. Give him what he has Vadai, and then leave over the 100. Masha'en came by us. Ken Zayin, that what? He's lying on the Gansa Maisa. He left over, he mixed in the 1/20th of Kitnius. So therefore what? You don't lose, he loses everything. Toshma Mesefer, here's what Benji remembered. Rav Yossi, in Cain, my hifsida ramai. If you're telling me that each one gets the 100, so the liar is getting what? What was rightfully his. He's got nothing to lose. So what's to deter a person in the future from going ahead and lying? It must be that what? Right? Now, everything should go ahead and remain till Eliyahu comes. In other words, this guy's 200, this guy's 100. No one gets back anything. No one gets back anything. Now this is a riot to Rav Huna. Guys, this is a riot to Rav Huna because we're canceling the lawyer, everything. He's losing his 100. So too over here, he's losing his 124th. Guys, good? It's amazing how the Gemara can bring in Kalayim and it's geschmack. And so we have a chayr of a riot Rav Huna. Says, "Well, you have a riot. Haki hashta. Hasam vadai ikaramai. Over there, vadai there's a lawyer. Only one of them gave 100. Only one of them gave 100, 200. Not both. Hachami yemar derure arav. Maybe it just happened that what? Maybe it happened that it got a little more mixed in. In other words, Hitaka didn't go ahead and do anything wrong. It just so happens that here in this Nebuch, this guy's luck, there was 120 there. So therefore, we only cancel him up to 124th, but we don't cancel the whole thing. So in other words, it's not a good sushtel either way. Toshma. Shtar sheyesh by ribis. Keeping to Bab Mitzia. A star that mamish has ribis. I write in the star, you lend me 100, I'm going to pay you back 200. Mamish, ribis ktsutsa, ribis daraisa. What's the din? Now we know by now the malv is over, the loiv is over. Nothing good's happening with this, right? Koinsin oisai, the malva we cancel him. Ve'ina goyve loyas akerem loyas ribis. He loses everything. Divrei Reb Meir. These are the words of Reb Meir. Guys, a raya to Rav Huna. When a guy does something wrong, you lose the whole kit and caboodle, right? So this is the chayr is a raya to Rav Huna. Says the Gemara Hachi Hashta. Hasam mishask siva hu da'avidle. Shuma. He's over the lav or simu alav neshech. As soon as he went ahead and wrote the shtar, even before collection or anything, he's over on the issa. The aver is done. Since he did the aver already, he loses everything. Hacha miyema de ruve ariv. Who's to say over here that he mixed in anything? Could be he didn't mix anything. It could be again, it's his bad luck that it was 120th. So in other words, over there, Yivadai did an issa, and Yivadai did it right away. But Mashenkin over here, where he didn't do an issa, maybe he doesn't lose everything. He only loses up to 124th, and therefore it's not a riot to Rav Huna. Toshmame Seifa. The Chachamim Moimrim, Goyves HaKeren, Veina Goyves HaRibis. So now it's a kasha on Rav Huna, right? You do get back your keren, but you lose your ribis. So you should get back what? To 124. Guys, you should get back to 124, right? So now it's a kasha on Rav Huna. The Gemara goes back and forth, right? So you should get back. Says the Gemara Hachi Hashta. Hasam vadai karnu de teruhu. Over there, vadai, there was keren of, in other words, the 100 that he gave was mamish fine. It's the 200 that he's asking back that's not fine. But the keren is fine, and therefore let him get that back. But hacha, conversely, over here where it's 120th, miyema de kuloi loya ruvi ariv, Ken sign that the guy did what? He mixed in the whole thing, and therefore he loses the whole thing. In other words, it's not a raya to kashan Rav Huna. Rav Huna can go ahead and play and say there's a big difference, because over here Ken sign that what? Ken sign that he lost, that he didn't mix in everything. Okay, I'm going to stop over here.